Final Stop Brasil, Chapter 35. End of the chapter Saydou. Painful end of year 2000. Our final separation took place without dispute, without shouting, just like that, from one night to the next morning. The night before everything was as usual. We had gone for a walk with Max, came back home, high-spirited and in good mood, on this sunny autumn Sunday. Had dinner together at night. Michael still liking Saydou like before, but now he had constructed a protective wall around him and was distant to him. Said good night and took Max with him to his room, when we also got ready for bed. We lay side by side for a while. I asked him to tell me about the Ivory Coast, which he gladly did. Then he took me in his arms, kissed me deeply, we made love, in his familiar, loving way, and afterwards I slept, with my head on his chest, and his arm wrapped around me. Sometime during the night, I woke up, and noticed Saydou did not sleep, but just lying with his eyes open. "Saydou, what is it? Can't you sleep? Is something worrying you?" "No, it's nothing. Just sleep, mon amour," he replied with a sad smile, kissed me and pushed my head back gently to his breast. We always got up very early, because Saydou had to go to change his clothes before work. He didn't keep nothing any more in my apartment. We had coffee and talked. Everything was as usual, but when we said goodbye at the door, everything was suddenly different. Our ritual was a kiss at the door, and before Saydou went down the stairs he turned around once more, blew a kiss at me, and always said, "Until later, mon amour." This morning he gave me a kiss, turned how he always did, and said, "Au revoir, chérie." By his sad look I saw what those words meant. Not once during our long relationship, not even in dispute, he had said au revoir. Without holding him back, without clinging on to him, I let him go. Kelly was right with her assumption. I knew now. I also knew Saydou really loved me, but saw no way out of this situation. This, however, didn't make it easier for me. I wept quietly, but told myself I had to be strong for Michael. I didn't want to make the same mistake as before. Instead, talked to Michael about it openly, that Saydou, this time, was gone forever, and I was very sad about it. Life goes on, and the main thing is, I got you, I concluded, whereupon Michael took Max, put him on my lap with the words, "And Max." Life went on with a normal everyday routine and ordinary problems in school. Michael voiced the desire to have braids, long false hair weaved into his own. I was thrilled. "Sure, why not? When do you want it? It will surely look nice on you." The same day we went to an Afro shop, where an African woman was not exactly gingerly dealing with Michael's hair. Brutal, she wove the long black hair into Michael's own. Now and then Michael's face contorted in pain, but he said nothing. A young man, perhaps 16 or 17 years of age, entered the store, voiced the same desire as Michael, and landed on the chair next to him. A second African woman started her work, while my fear was growing that the one maltreating Michael pulled out his hair completely instead of braiding it. Before long, the second African woman began to shout loudly at the other boy. "How old are you? Look at the boy next to you. He says no sound, and is not crying like you." Automatically, I looked at the mirror in front of this boy, and could see he actually was crying in pain. The tears ran over his face. "Michael, you're okay?" I asked now, seriously concerned. With a weak smile, he nodded to me. I took a deep breath. when he was almost finished. The braids were shortened a bit and the ends burned with a flame so they didn't open. Michael looked very handsome with it, and liked it also very much. However, the very much tense scalp caused him headache. The African woman reassured us this would decline after a short time. The pleasure had cost me 100 marks. In those days a lot of money for me, because working for a temporary agency I made no big salary. The only ones earning in this business were the staff landers. Michael admired himself proudly in the mirror at home. It looks really cool, and I agreed with him. The next morning, Michael's world, however, looked very different. He now had realized he had to go like this to the hated school. "Mom, can I stay home today?" "Why? Are you sick?" Of course he wasn't. I knew he was afraid of new agitation. With his new hairstyle, he indeed caused exactly this. First, Michael protested, but I decided to accompany him to the class. Challenging, I looked at these small German monsters. Michael has his hair braided in the manner as the Africans do it. Michael is half African. Besides, we like it very much. If one of you doesn't like it, or you have some complaints about it, then don't hesitate to say something now. There was only affected silence, but this was not to stay that way. After only 2 days, Michael had the braids himself half ripped open, half pulled out by force. I was more than sad and worried everything would now begin again from scratch. My efforts to find a place in another school were futile. Sven exclaimed, "My goodness, it's time we dye your hair again. You're totally grey at the base." Grey I had become shortly after Michael's birth, and dyed my hair regularly since. This time I waved him off. "No, I don't want to dye. I want you to cut it." Infidel, Sven stared at me. "I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry, but I cannot cut your beautiful long hair." "Well, then I go to another barber." Stood up and was about to leave. "Wait. I'll do it if you really want me to." "But why? Do you want to play the grey ugly mouse now, just because it's broken up with you and Saydou? Rita, there are other men in the world." With a brand new short haircut and a witty mixture of grey and brown, I went home. Michael got a real shock, and he was not the only one. Kathy was shocked, and Mark asked almost angrily, "And that's what you want now? Merely be unattractive and keep all the men away from you?" Sabina and Tom liked the cut, but wanted to persuade me to dye my hair again. "Damn it! I'm dyeing as long as I can think. I'm fed up. I don't want to dye anymore." Rosa screamed in horror. "Rita, what have you done? You look 10 years older now." So what? Maybe I appeared appropriately my age. I invited Sabina and Tom for dinner and opened them my plan. The money I put aside for the Ivory Coast, I need no more for that purpose. I want to rebuild my kitchen. Tom, will you help me with this? I laid the plan before them I had designed during my long and lonely nights. Both were extremely enthusiastic, and Tom, who was since ages unemployed, was pleased, of course, to be able to earn a few marks extra. I had very precise ideas. Walls new, new flooring, new fridge with freezer, stove, and new compartments anyway, with new oven and ceramic hob, sink and new dishwasher, and everything else as the board of the sink in matching wood paneling. To round it up, I would have to buy a nice countertop, and as a special highlight, a freely suspended bar table, with bar stools I would buy later. All in all, a super luxury kitchen, self-made. Before we started, my application at the debt collection company was completed, and initially I had some paid days off until the next dues. On one hand, I was happy to finish the work because I couldn't neither identify myself with a job noble friend with it. On the other hand, there were many nice colleagues with whom I made quickly friends also privately. I had saved the fare I got paid automatically because it was just around the corner. Just like food I had for free in the canteen. My free time I used to rattle off all the furniture stores with Tom, had me shown patterns, had drawings made, until I found exactly the right model. Everything was tailored just like made for me. I found a beautiful designed worktop in grey-blue colors. 4 weeks later, everything should be delivered. Then Tom would cut the bar table in a conical shape and in tapering process, secured with the decorative steel beams on the ceiling. In between, Judith announced she was moving out. That's exactly what I needed now. Again, I went in search of a tenant, but this time nothing worked out. There simply wasn't anyone wanting to go home at the weekend, and I wanted but to my kingdom for myself during the weekend. The money, however, I desperately needed. The temp agency sent me to a new use, car electronics, in Hamburg-Bahrenfeld. The days of long traffic jams definitely seemed to be over for me. The company was looking for an experienced accountant. This indeed I was, and once again on safe ground. But when I started my first day, the head of the department took me to my desk in the open plan office. I felt like turning around and run out again. On the desk were stacks of files from the predecessor, not touched and otherwise ignored by everyone. Before I could even ask one question, the nice department head waved off with her hand. "I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no idea of the matter. I can be no help." "But you will handle it," spoke it, and was gone. Helplessly, I looked around, but the stealthy, partly repellent. Some malicious looks I earned told me I could probably expect little help here. Either I bit myself through, or I would perish here alone. But where should I start? All the accounting knowledge is namely useless if one wasn't familiar with the material and had no idea where and on which account draw something or book something, how and where the differences were created. This, at least, I had to know for finally perform a smooth balance. So I spent the first day seeing through the stack of files and sorted them by customers, then by actuality. The only thing the department head was useful for was the explanation how I had to use the proprietary computer program. She gave me my passwords and then returned back at the desk next to mine for continuing with her private phone calls. I looked at some of the customer accounts and fell from the clouds. Some pointed to differences in millions. "Oh yes, our Japanese chef is here once a week. He will call you to go through the clearing of the differences with you." The boss called over to me from the next desk with a smile. I didn't feel neither like laughing nor smiling. They surely not expected me to have everything straight in a week. I'm not a magician, I thought. The result of the first day was I still had just as many stacks on the desk as in the morning, only slightly shifted. Well, a few incoming payments I indeed checked and released for booking. Frustrated, I went home. It was for me the first time I did feel professionally incompetent, and I still wasn't mentally stable enough, since I still suffered terribly from the separation of Saydou. So these kind of things overwhelmed me even more. Michael could feel something was really wrong, and not even ask me why I silently put the leash on Max and took a walk outside with him. This sure would be doing me some good now. The second day was similar to the first, and I seriously considered reporting sick. In addition to the current incoming payments, likewise, with a few exceptions, all had differences to the invoice amounts, thus immediately landed back on my table, and elevated the piles yet. I pushed the piles helplessly from one corner of the desk to the other. I made it just in time to behold the drawers and hanging boards of my desk where I found the files of the entire customers, pretty much all car manufacturers in Germany and its branches in Europe. However, not only those, because in the drawers were piled up even more unsolved cases, going back to 1994. This could not be real. The accounts were charged with 6-year-old differences. Accurate as an accountant, my hair stood on end. When I looked around the office, I could see the employees were more than anything else staying outside the office drinking coffee or smoking a cigarette. In general, we held more private conversation than dealing with work. Not unlike the young woman who was sitting to my left and smiled at me encouragingly. She seemed to be quite nice, so I decided to ask her what her practicing area was, but had the feeling to disturb her. She was very much focused on surfing the internet. Oh, I edit the empty containers of which the car radios and CD players are being provided in. Oh yeah? Funny. I had tens of differences of exactly these empty containers on my desk. For politeness' sake, the colleagues took me with them to the canteen, but I noticed this was a closed society. I was only one of the temporary workers and didn't belong to them. They let me feel this very clearly. This evening I was again quite monosyllabic, and Michael watched me again silently, taking Max on a leash to go walking, whereupon Max was delighted, of course. In fact, it relaxed me watching Max playing with the other dogs. I made my decision not to throw the towel, but slog, no matter how, even though it was almost a hopeless challenge. So the next day, my struggle began with the colleagues. For each question I posed, I got, "Not now, I don't have time," as an answer, or "Can we talk about this later?" Of later became tomorrow, and so it went on. I wasn't going to take this. My colleagues didn't want to help me, then I would get at it differently. "Do I have permission to call customers abroad?" I asked my boss. "Of course. You can call whom and how long you want. In general, you can do everything the way you want it. I give you full authority for everything you do." Wonderful. From now, some things would be different here. I resolved the customers who clearly had exactly the same differences in their creditor accounts as we had on our debitor accounts, and therefore it was of course quite in their interest to help me. It didn't take long before I realized something was very wrong in this place, and the main cause of most of the differences were in the incorrect price entry. The price input was normally the task of the telephone sale, where the most reserved colleagues were sitting who didn't want to help me at all, and thus came the first big bang. "Now you listen to me. I'm trying to do my job, just like you, and I'm not letting you put me off from one day to another. Until noon tomorrow, I want to have the clarification of these cases in this folder on my desk. There are price deviations, and I want to know why. Have I made myself clear enough?" The head of the sale was staring at me with hateful eyes, but our boss overheard everything. Tapping me on the shoulder, she announced, "Finally, someone who puts a stop to this sloppiness here. I knew you can do it." But I was still far from there. Now, every day I dragged files to the booking department, which was staffed by 4 employees. One of them was a French woman who lived a long time in Germany, but still used very much the French accent, as it was clearly to hear, just like Saydou. It hit me right in the heart every time I only heard her speak, but I never showed my emotions. Sometimes I even talked in French with her, and I had to admit I incidentally learned very much of Saydou. With her and another colleague, I went through each item on my list. Let me explain every detail, every difference, and how they arose. Wrote down notes. The flow of work in this company was spread so wide and by so many people that the origins of the differences were just one great big puzzle. So I started this puzzle. New distinctions are cleared immediately and made sure the stack of old deposits grew no more. Every single difference I could write off the customer accounts was a small sense of achievement for me, and in endless overtime I started to work through the old burdens. As nice as the staff was of the booking department, I had to realize, unfortunately, existed here also a great sloppiness. Daily accounts were confused. Items were falsely booked on accounts. Invoice sums appeared too high on the accounts, or it was just forgotten to recognize an amount. Instead of crying in my lonely nights over the loss of Saydou, I concocted strategies to reduce this extremely high source of errors, which was distributed throughout the entire company. During the day, I sat with the technological leader, the engineer for the development of new devices, with the head of financial accounting, and my department head in meetings, presented lists of sources of error and Excel spreadsheets I created to control the individual workflows. In the head section, I harvested admiration and respect. The technical chief and the engineer realized I was a serious, dedicated staff and were willing to cooperate with me. Even the Japanese leader, who initially lost not a single word while I presented him the daily increasing differences on Mondays, let himself now down to short and scarce remarks. But among my immediate colleagues, I had no friends. On the contrary, I was the enemy, the fun spoiler, who came to interfere when private conversations were held, or when people surfed or chatted on the internet. "Oh, you are not busy at the moment? I have a question." With a woman beside me who was editing the empty containers, I clashed also, as a large part of small differences represented the empty containers. So I asked the initially quite nice colleague for a meeting. "Can you please explain me your workflow?" I began, but she didn't quite understand what I wanted from her. "Why? Do you want to control me also now, or what?" Well, she wasn't far from getting it almost right. Reluctantly, she explained. The lists of the containers which left the stock she would directly receive from there. In these lists was detailed where the containers went to. Accordingly, she wrote and sent the invoices for these containers to the customers. The copies she submitted to accounting. And then? I asked, somewhat surprised. "What then?" "Nothing, and then, that's all," she replied rudely now. No wonder she had all day to surf the internet. "What are you doing with the return containers? How do you charge them?" "They must be recorded somewhere." I tried to remain friendly. "Is that my problem? I'm not an accountant. The warehouse sends the numbers of incoming containers to accounting. How am I supposed to know?" One more question. How long are you doing this job?" 11 months. Why?" "Oh, just curiosity," I lied. But surveying the account balance of empties, I noticed that before probably a more competent person was doing the job. The accounts didn't consider themselves as the relevant department to clear up these differences, and this woman was only doing half of her job. At home, I created a new Excel spreadsheet with different types of containers, prices, and recycling rates, which were supposed to be credited to the customers for the return. Until late in the night, I printed all out and placed these lists with a pile of empties, differences, the next morning on the desk of my colleague, who almost freaked out at the sight of the stack and the lists. "What is this? Now you distribute the work here, or what?" "Keep cool now. I have prepared the lists. If you type in the numbers, like under the lines given, and save them, you already have a super base for the accounting of the empty containers. All these files here, you need only to enter them by invoice amount and recycling rate. Compared with the predetermined prices, you will find out the differences easily. All you do then is note how much the customer will be credited or debited, and give me back the things so I can process it." There was a terrible crash. She complained to our boss, who answered calmly, "But that's your task. I don't understand your excitement. The lists are certainly a good idea. Facilitate the work immensely." Without a further glance, she started with the task. But from the day after, she took a sick leave for months, and therefore this work stayed put with me. Meanwhile, in my apartment broke out the pure chaos. The kitchen was cleared, and we were busy to demolish the old wallpaper. Kadria put her kitchen at our disposal and made sure we had a hot meal if we didn't go to McDonald's, or had a cold meal at least. When we glued the white wallpaper, I later painted blue with my own mix. A man came to introduce himself for the room. With this man, though, I could not imagine living together under one roof, and pointed out I'd been looking for a woman. Tom took me aside and told me, "You see, you currently can't find a female tenant, but you need the money. Try it out. Maybe the first impression is deceptive." I let him persuade me, and thus the man moved in. For him, it was no problem that he couldn't use the kitchen at the time, and that boxes of pans and dishes were spread all over the place. After the walls were finished, we started with the floor and tore out the old tiles to replace them with wood parquet. This work lasted for days, but we made it before the delivery of the kitchen furniture. Now it was really getting down to it. Tom, however, proved himself as an expert. Wherever Michael was useful, Tom involved him, and Michael liked to help enthusiastically. Once again, I was painfully aware of how much a man was missing who were tinkering with Michael or fiddled about some mechanical things with him. The new tenant was distasteful to me right from the beginning. The way he was standing with a cup of coffee in hand, talking to Tom, who meanwhile almost broke his back, shifting some of the heavy parts by himself. I could have slapped this man left and right. But he's one of the ex-GDR. They don't know any real work. The only thing they know is being punctual to hold a broom. Well, Tom had to know. He also was an Aussie from the ex-GDR. But when the man began to talk in loud voice to himself in the room, Tom and I just looked at each other wondering. Both of us were glued with our ear to the wall to listen what it could be he was discussing with himself, and broke out laughing about our curiosity and the whole situation. Tom performed a real miracle in my kitchen, especially with a hanging bar table he cut out of the same material as the countertop. Everything fitted together harmoniously in color. The kitchen front in light pine harmonized beautifully with the wood floor, the blue wall paint, the work desk in gray blue, and the bar stools made of tubular steel with blue leather cushions were unique in their shape and absolute fantastic. I had searched all over Hamburg and around until I found what corresponded to my ideas. We could hardly get enough looking at this environment as Sabine, Tom, Michael, and I sat for the first time at the bar with coffee and cake. One after another of my friends came to admire the kitchen, but I was worlds apart from all of them, spoke only of my job. They neither understood what I was talking about, nor were they interested in it. For my part, I didn't want to hear no more of discos and certainly nothing of Africans. Only Ushi listened patiently, like a mother listens to her daughter, reporting about school. My friends finally stayed away, but it didn't matter to me. I eventually had Michael, Max, and my computer. Till late in the nights, I sat in front of exactly this one, and was guest in chat rooms and forums. I wrote private emails with an Afro-American woman, got to know an Afro-American man, whom I even sent photos of me from the time of modeling by internet. He called me several times, but basically it was all an illusion. A beautiful illusion, reminding me in a way of Tony, my first great love of my life, without the slightest chance, just like my second great love, Saydou. I wondered how Tony was now, what he was doing. Was he married, with children? Was he still living at all? There were sites on the internet where one could search for people, but they were not for free. Paying for an illusion. By the parents of my old friend Dagmar, I found out her email address and came back into contact with her. She rejoiced and wrote me a long email, told me how happy she was in San Antonio, Texas, that she had 2 almost grown sons now, but still was in love in a romantic way, as she used to be first with her husband. Initially, I found it amazing and envied her, actually, for this family happiness, but then was puzzled when she wrote me how proud she was of her 2 sons who served in the U.S. Army. Weapons, the military, those things I wanted to keep away from Michael at all costs. Finally, we talked on the phone and exchanged our old memories. Then I asked her whether she didn't have any fear for her sons. No, proud Americans defend their country. It was seemingly normal that kids were growing up with arms. Dagmar's husband, she reported, had taught the boys to shoot quite early. Everything inside me resisted. When I told her I had after Kathy a son and he was Afro-German, her reaction was very cautious. I remembered her husband never liked African Americans. The more it surprised me when she invited me to visit them on vacation. Wouldn't your husband have no problem if I'm coming with my son? For God's sake, for your son it would be more dangerous here. You can, of course, not bring him. Angry, I asked, tell me, in what century are you living there? The time of racial segregation is surely over. Not here. Also, Afro-Americans are living here, but they live among themselves. Some time ago, a black and a white couple had moved here, but not lived here very long. The man was tied up on a car and was dragged through the entire village until he was dead. She talked about it as it was the most normal thing in the world. I'm sorry, but where I can't go together with my son, I don't want to go either. It was just a brief revival of our friendship. Michael changed, and I could feel once again a barrier building up between us. We talked to each other, but I realized he had become much tougher and more aggressive. At school, he didn't take nothing anymore. Instead, beat others until his opponent was down on the ground. Again, I received complaints from the school, but now I also became stubborn. Unfortunately, I can't find another school for the moment. Otherwise, I would have long since removed him. His aggression is simply the response to the provocations he is exposed to. We just have to go through with it until the end of the school year. Shocking for me was, he let out his aggression now in fits of rage in his private environment, also, where he had always been omitted and preferred as a peaceful boy. When I spoke with him, he just grinned. It's nothing, Mama. He also changed his circle of friends, and now had friends I didn't like, but I was helpless. 4 weeks after our lodger had moved in, he was back out of the apartment. Several times, he left the remains of stinking cheese sandwich on my living room table, even though I forbade him to stay in my living room. He complained about Michael's music being too loud. Michael told me this when I came home from work. Oh yes? I then turned up halfway my 1000-watt system. To turn it up completely I had never dared, for sure it would have cracked the windows, and commented, now he does have a reason to complain. These were the rare moments when Michael and I were still really close. This was also the case when I discovered this lodger as a thief of my toothbrush. Automatically, I grabbed after my toothbrush in the morning and grabbed into the void. Basically, I set it back after use into the glass where it wasn't now. Michael's toothbrush was in place, mine wasn't. Michael, have you seen my toothbrush? What have I? Where should I have seen your toothbrush? I don't know, but it's gone. I mumbled, annoyed now. Michael got up and scratched his head thoughtfully. Both of us looked at the same time to the door of our lodger. I looked doubtfully at Michael. This can't be, can it? Michael walked resolutely to the door. Wait, I held him back. We can't simply do that. After all, he isn't in. I can, and Michael was inside the room, looking through the chaos for my toothbrush, which he finally found in an old toilet bag. It's yours, isn't it? He triumphantly held the corpus delicti in the air. A thief of toothbrushes. This, no one is going to believe me. Be glad you don't have false teeth. Imagine he would have snatched them. Michael remarked, and just by the imagination we both poured out laughing. But for me the fun had an end. I chucked him out and left the room empty. I wanted nothing more to do with tenants and didn't even need it any more, because before the year was over I was contracted on a top salary with the company. I had the control over accounts, receivables, reminders, containers, including repatriation. I was responsible of the sales prices and lowered the error sources in all departments almost to zero. My enemy of the sale still made one last attempt to drop me into problems when she reported me for small, unauthorized write-offs in euro amounts. My boss asked me for an explanation. The amounts incurred by the price differences and are no longer to be cleared up because they are costing effectively more in working hours by trying to clear them. That's why I booked them out. It made sense to her, and so were all the accounts straight, and I made sure this would stay that way. The booking department was wonderfully cooperating with me, and I had a nice friendly relationship with the employees, pointed out nicely for errors, even when it occurred the second time. But if it happened the third time, I was becoming uncomfortable, and the people knew it. Sloppiness at work existed no more. If complicated debits or credits incurred by repairs, I had myself explained in hours of talks. I had myself explained in hours of talks with the technology department according to negotiate with the customer. That I like best, especially with the foreign customers in Spain or Portugal. After I had cleared the last major difference of Volkswagen in Spain, which was 5 years old, the chief department congratulated me to my success, and the Spanish manager invited me to celebrate my success in Spain. Also, I liked less to negotiate with clients in Eastern Europe. I was fully living in and for this job. It didn't bother me that my colleagues avoided me like the plague. At noon, I had lunch with the head of the department. What did I need colleagues for, or friends? I pushed aside. I had shot myself into the sidelines. Besides superficial conversations with other dog owners at the walks with Max, there was no one left for me. I was painfully aware of it in the dark and cold season. The December was very cold, and this always hated winter struck me this year very much at heart and spirit. Since I wanted to stay clear at work, I had stopped taking antidepressants. For Michael also impacted the cold again in form of bad asthma attacks. Although he was set on medication, and we had always medicine in the house for emergencies. For the panic attacks he could suffocate, there was no medicine, and it exceeded my forces to calm him and take his fear until he exhausted fell asleep in my arms. Fear and worry about Michael tugged on my very much frayed nerves. At night I often lay awake, hugged Max close to me and brooded. It still hurt, the same as the day Saydou had left me. With him I had lost my grip, the support I needed so much in my life. Externally, I had always been a very self-confident and independent woman, but inside me it was a different story. Right now, in the cold winter, I missed so much his warm body, his love. My organism had always been different than of other people. Even with the heater on full blast and my warm blanket, it took hours until my body heated up. Under this symptom, I suffered as long as I could think. Nothing I could do about it, and it didn't matter if I put on 3 thick sweaters on top of each other, a thick scarf, 2 pairs of socks, and a cap. If I left the house, I was shivering from cold anyway. Even a hot bath didn't alter the fact I was shaking and rattling my teeth. Earlier on, Saydou had taken me firmly into his arms and rubbed my body until I was feeling warmer, and his body temperature would do the rest. I missed him so much in every way. Time and time again, my thoughts wandered to him at night, and also to the horrible things that happened this year. With my parents, I had broke the contact after Michael came into the psychiatry. Also, I had informed my parents about it. My mother had called a week later and asked, with no interest at all, just obligatory, "How are you?" "We went on Sunday to see Patrick and Kim and—" Instead this time, shutting my ears, I had shouted at her, "Damn it! Michael has perpetrated a suicide attempt. And do you want to tell me about your great-grandchildren? It interests me, fuck all. Have you really no feelings at all?" Her answer shocked me. "We are old and have to think of us and our health. We can't take every problem to heart." I had snarled at her concerning us. They no longer needed to take nothing to heart. Just call no more. With that, I had hung up. From this time, Michael and Saydou were actually the only family I had. Forget your family, you've got me. Time and time again, I heard Saydou saying these words. And friends? I stayed away because the sight of families or happy couples I just no longer endured. With horror, I thought of the upcoming Christmas, and the thought of my 40th birthday meant pure horror for me. Against my will, my boss asked me to take leave. "You have an insanely long list of overtime, and it needs to be cut somewhere. You also have as long as you are with us not taken a single day off. You are of unestimated value for us. However, you have to relax for once. Enjoy a few free days during that Christmas time with your son." For hours, I sat alone in my kitchen on a stool at the counter, drinking coffee and smoking countless cigarettes, telling myself how beautiful I had it here. At the same time, I shook myself with horror at the sight of snow when I looked out the window. For Max's sake, I overcame myself and took walks with him in the snow. He loved just as much as the sand. For Christmas, Michael was satisfied. With the bonus I received and the payment of the leave I didn't take from the temporary employment company, I could give Michael more expensive gifts. I absolutely didn't want anything like on his birthday again. Surprisingly, Michael received a package from my sister Elke. Was it bad conscience? The Christmas tree was a fake, and even Christmas decorations I left in the closet, barely decorating the little tree. On Christmas Eve, I prepared for Michael and me pizza from the deep freezer in the oven, and for Christmas we had spaghetti, the meals Michael liked. Most of the time, Michael and I spent together in front of the PlayStation, since the game Elke had sent him, Tomb Raider, was not even for his age, and Michael was afraid to play it alone. We sat day and night to move forward with the game. During the week between Christmas and New Year, my mood dropped to 0, which was surpassed on my birthday yet. Kathy knew me long enough and experienced I had time and time again overcome all the defeats, scrambled back up, and started from scratch. Even my sense of humor I always found back, no matter how bad it was. But she had long since realized this was not the case in this year, and the events had completely overrun me. She knew I pretended my indifference and the laughter, that I was deeply sad below the surface. Kathy was used to my apartment lively with any people and action, music constantly playing. The music playing now came out of Michael's room. Visit consisted only of Michael's friends, and she caught me many times, even on Sunday afternoon in bed. The new stove, with ceramic hob, had hardly been used. I preferred to send Michael to the new snack bar, opened recently on the other side of our block. On my birthday, I woke up with a doomsday mood already. I was 40 years old. Old, just the right word. Old and lonely. I had dreamed all my life of a happy family. Everything had gone wrong in my life. Absolutely everything. Even before I roused myself, I was dissolved in tears. Michael, as always, forgot to wish me happy birthday, but at least took the task to go outside with Max. I wanted to go nowhere, and certainly see no one. Alone I sat at my table, drinking my coffee, while my tears rolled unwanted over my face, when Kathy suddenly, without prior notification, came by. "What have you done? Why is Mom crying?" she hissed at Michael, who hadn't done nothing at all. "Nothing has he done. I'm just having terrible headache," I lied. She told me she and Mark would celebrate the birthday and the New Year's Eve at home with some guests, and wished Michael and I would come too. "If you want, you can take Michael with you. I will go back to bed. I feel really bad, and certainly not for celebrating." This Kathy would not accept, as simple as that. "Oh, come on, it's our birthday. Take a headache tablet now, lay down a bit again, and surely, until coffee time, you'll be feeling better. Then I'll pick you up. You don't need to drive yourself, and can also drink something." She didn't rest until I gave in. The phone rang. I didn't expect, necessarily, this call, but in precaution I sent Kathy to answer. Actually, it was my mother, who possessed the nerve to call. I silently waved off with my hand. "Mom is sick and sleeping. Yes, I'll let her know you have called." For these things Kathy had always been very useful. Her brother not. He was too honest. My mood did not improve as we sat in front of the coffee and Kathy's homemade cakes. Michael was very excited, with a male resident, to ignite fireworks. As always, I was afraid something would happen to him, but could I forbid him this? The headaches I really did have now tormented me so much I only wished to be alone. When later the guests arrived, friends of Mark and neighbors, all couples, it was definitely too much for me. One of Kathy's neighbors came holding hands with her African man. Both sat opposite of me, and I was reminded of the New Year's Eve 1 year ago in the Chinese restaurant with Sabina and Tom. I couldn't stand it any longer. "Kathy, please, take me home. I'm feeling terrible." I fought back the tears. Didn't want the others to see how much it got me out of the socket. One of the guests remarked only, "Rita, you're white as a wall." Kathy also noticed it, but she knew this was not mainly a health problem. Kathy seemed to be seriously concerned about me for the first time. I didn't want to leave me alone. "Mom, you can lie down here." "Please, Kathy, take me home. I can't stand the noise." In reality, I just wanted to be alone and not having to see all these couples wishing themselves a Happy New Year soon. What Happy New Year? Like this one ending now? Very soon? Reluctantly, she took me and Max home. I asked her to drop me off outside the garage, so Max could do his business. "Mom, are you really okay?" "Frankly, I'm afraid to leave you alone." "See you tomorrow. I love you." I climbed out the car. Inside my apartment, I was shaken by a violent fit of weeping. I threw myself on my unmade bed and sobbed uncontrollably. Max also jumped on the bed, scratched with his paw on my arm and yelped. I pressed him close to me, while mentally the entire terrible year passed once more. How promising it had begun, this year, how hopeful. Never would I have dreamt about that I ended up as a striptease model, or if someone would have predicted at the beginning of this year Michael would commit a suicide attempt, I certainly would have taken the person for being crazy. My eyes fell on the framed photo of Saydou, still on my wall unit. I got up, took it in my hands, and sobbed even more. Saydou, where are you? I need you so much. Why have you abandoned me? An incredible wall of self-reproach, guiltiness towards Michael, to have failed all along the line, crashed suddenly down on me. Everything turned out exactly how Tony had predicted it, how right he had been. I could suddenly feel clearly how Michael must have felt when he climbed over the balcony protection. My headache was almost unbearable. I went into the bathroom to look for a pill when my pack of sleeping pills fell into my hand. I had the doctor prescribed for me. The pack was still almost complete. In addition to the headache pills, I took this pack with me to the living room. I initially only took the headache pill when the telephone rang. "Why don't you all just leave me alone?" I screamed into the void before I picked up the phone. "Rita, are you okay? Kathy is completely dissolved with worry about you and crying. She didn't want to call because she wasn't sure whether you were sleeping." Mark spoke, fairly excited. "I have been sleeping," I lied. "But tell her I'm okay. Ciao." Again, I took the pack of sleeping pills into my hand. Also, the tears still ran over my face. I was calm now. Was this not the only solution to end my loneliness and the sadness? I wasn't allowed to be happy in my life. It was probably destined. And what I still had to expect from life? My job? Day by day, the same, and before I knew it, Michael was an adult, and then I already felt too old for a fresh start. Again the phone rang. This could indeed only be Kathy at this time. "Hello? Happy birthday!" I heard this familiar voice saying it to me. In the background I could hear music. Saydou celebrated in a discotheque. "Rita, are you okay? Rita, say something." What could I say? I said nothing, and Saydou hung up abruptly. Like mechanically, I went to the refrigerator, took out a bottle of wine, opened it, poured me a glass of wine, and took 4 of the sleeping pills with the first glass, lit a cigarette, poured me another glass, and took further 4 of the tablets when the doorbell rang. Max jumped up and barked like crazy. I tried to calm him down, ignoring the ringing, but it didn't stop. Then a moment of silence, but Max stood with ears pricked at the door. The wine and the pills started to work when it was ringing and knocking violently at my apartment door. Next I heard Saydou call, "Rita, open the door now!" Max was barking like crazy, and the noise shot like painful arrows through my head. Reluctantly, I went to the door and noticed how dizzy I felt. I managed to open the door, but had to lean against the wall as Saydou pushed the door open wide, and behind him stormed Kadriye, who had been attentive by the noise. Saydou grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me. "Rita, what have you done?" Kadriye had already gone into the living room to see what had happened and came back. "Saydou, she's been taking pills." I heard her from far away. Kadriye talked to me, but Saydou pushed her aside and me into the bathroom, grabbed me brutally in the neck, and pushed my head over the toilet, then stuck a finger of his other hand into my throat. I choked and had to vomit as he quickly pulled out his finger. I vomited everything, my stomach cramped together. Kadriye called, "Shall I call an ambulance?" Saydou replied, "I don't think it's necessary anymore, but please, make a strong coffee." She went into her apartment while Saydou washed and dried my face to push me into the living room. He laid me on the bed and sat next to me on the edge. Sad, he looked at me, silent for a long time. My body ached, I felt sick, dizzy, and had chills. Max sat in front of Saydou and scratched with his front paws on his legs, jumped on his lap, then down again. I was completely excited. Kadriye came back with a thermal pot of coffee, put it down, looked in my kitchen for cups, took them, and asked Saydou whether she should remain. Saydou thanked her and promised her to stay with me. Kadria now seated herself beside me, touched my face and asked, "Rita, what are you doing? That's no solution." Then she left us alone. Saydou filled the cup of coffee and ordered harshly, "Drink." Once again, clutching my stomach, I tried to get up, but couldn't make it alone. Again, Saydou helped me to the bathroom, where I vomited the rest of my stomach contents. Outside, I heard the fireworks exploding, so it was midnight. Back in the living room, I could see the bright lights of the fireworks through the window. After the second cup of coffee, I was a little better, and now Saydou spoke for the first time. "Rita, what happened? Why did you do that? Why did you call? And what do you want here? Why do you keep coming back into my life again and don't leave me alone? You let me down this lousy way. What do you want from me now?" Saydou gave me a strange look, and I realized he saw me the first time with my short grey hair. "Rita, you're right, but I swear I never wanted to hurt you." The remains of the sleeping tablets, which had already penetrated into the blood, were working now, and I just felt tired. Saydou appeared surprised when he went into the kitchen to fetch water. "The kitchen is very nice." I had nothing else to do with the money for the Ivory Coast. This was for him like a slap in the face. I could see it clearly. I drank another coffee, and this gave me just enough strength to tell him, "Saydou, I want you out of my life, because you will never stay with me anyway. It was all a big illusion, like everything in life. A nice dream. You were and always will be my dream man. I love you and will always love you, but I can't endure any more pain and suffering. Go and never come back again. This is my life, and if I want to finish it, then it is my decision, just as you actually live your life, making your decisions." Saydou protested. He wouldn't leave me alone under no circumstances, but I reassured him I wouldn't try it again this day. To gain time, he told me he no longer lived in the asylum home. He had gone undercover, was living illegal now. I didn't ask where he was. For a while we talked, when it rang again at the door. Saydou got up to open. The next moment I heard Kathy's voice cry out, "You!" She came into the living room, looking questioningly at me. Her eyes fell on the pack of sleeping pills. Tired, I explained to her, and that it had been pure coincidence Saydou had called. Relieved, she smiled at him. "The whole night I had this shit feeling Mom is going to do something like this. Thank God you were on time." Irritated, she added, "You two want to be alone? Am I disturbing?" Saydou looked at me and understood what my eyes were telling him. "Can we at least stay friends?" "Later, maybe, but not now.